Behind the Shades.
There is some people will say that there's a lack of resources for men in the capacity that you're looking to assist them with mental health, progressing their career on a professional and a personal level. How does it feel to be feeling that quote unquote void for the men who need help in those areas?
I mean, it's amazing for me. First, I mean, I'd like to address the fact that most, our culture, Canada, the US, like we never allowed men for many, many generations to have emotions, except, anger was an acceptable one, right? And now that we're sort of lessening the grip on that social norm, it's wonderful to watch. I say young men because they're usually younger than me. They're in their like 30s and 40s. Start to recognize that it's okay and that they've actually had emotions this whole time. It's just they've always called it anger or stress, right? Those two emotions. But to watch their vocabulary grow around what emotions are and be able to negotiate them in a way that is more masterful than just exploding or raising their voice or whatever the things that they were taught or learned to do, to be able to get introspective. It's fun to watch and it's amazing to watch the transformation of going, okay, like I'm a human, not, I am a male human, but I am a human and I get to have all these emotions because we're having, all these emotions all day, every day, and watching them start to flourish by being able to name, like, oh, right. I mean, I called it stress before, but actually, it's anxiousness or it's, fear based or whatever. And I just love that part, because it doesn't, I think, the other part of the societal norm is like, oh, don't be a wussy or whatever if you're a man and, don't have all these emotions and you certainly can't cry. And I'm not saying that, the men in my sessions do cry, although some of them do. It's not about that. It's like it's not being a wuss if you're having emotions just because you're a man, and it doesn't have to show up as weak or, I think vulnerability has always been seen as weak, and I don't agree. I think it's actually strength.
It's like how, and you and I are old enough to remember, don't cry or else you want me to give you something to cry for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, to cry
And
about. Yeah,
then
I'll give you something
you
to
remember
cry
you remember that, right? And
about.
then men would have to stand tall, right? We would have to be, head up, chest out. We're proud. I used to call it peacocking, where you have all the feathers and you're kind of showing off. And I had to go through something similar with a few of my friends, whereas, and you tell me if this is what you'd help with as well. It's one thing to identify the emotions you want to experience. It's another thing to put it into words. Is that what you have observed as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can't, let me just take one step back and say, like, I truly believe that we're here to heal and grow, to gain consciousness and evolve as humans. And part of that healing process is being able to have emotional awareness. And if you can't name what's going on for you, then it's really challenging to change it. So if you're having, high levels of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, whatever, um, if you can't address them and really get to understand how they like show up in your body physically, emotionally, mentally, or how you're reacting, whether it's raising your voice, cursing, whatever the things are. If you can't name those things, then it's very difficult to change them. And I think that's the first step to the healing process. Well, actually, the first step is usually crisis. Like, I can't take it anymore. Like, I don't have the skill set to figure out how to quit having these experiences on repeat. And that's usually when people come to me is like, I'm not sure why I'm here, but like there's parts of my life that I'm tired of experiencing. They don't feel good. And, and then the next piece is the emotional awareness piece. Like, what's actually happening here? Like, waking up to, I mean, sometimes I'll have a client come to me and I don't talk about the past all that much because I don't think it's as important as, say, like psychologists do. But what I think is important is to understand that a lot of these habits and things that that are perpetuating in our lives came from the past. And so in the beginning, I sort of talk about it a little bit so they can understand that, like, belief structures are based on these past experiences. And it's really good for them to see that, oh, if I was in an abusive family dynamic, that, it would lead to me lacking some confidence or, feeling hyper stressed out a lot, being in fight, flight, or freeze a lot. So it's important in that way to understand, like, oh, let's connect the dots to why I might be sort of calibrated physiologically, emotionally, mentally to these experiences and figure out how to heal from them so we don't have to keep experiencing the bad things over and over again.
Because what I found, and there's so much literature and information on this, is that you can always pinpoint it. Well, not always. You can usually pinpoint it to an experience or experiences when they're younger. And they may view it as the norm. And then when they get into adulthood, I think many of us come to a point, as you mentioned, there's a crisis period where we're thinking, wait a minute, I've seen this as a child, I've seen this as a teenager. I'm doing it this way, but it doesn't feel appropriate. It doesn't feel right. And it's causing me grief, anxiety, stress, anger, these different types of emotions. When they come to you, Erin, is it, as you mentioned, emotional awareness, is it just getting them to be emotionally aware? Or is it maybe a little bit of reprogramming to understand how to be emotionally aware?
Actually, it's kind of both, right? I mean, because sometimes people will come to me and I'll ask them to tell me about their past, and they'll say, my childhood was great. And then I, go, okay, so there's no emotional awareness there, right? Because as a child, I mean, gosh, you look at little kids and, they're free form, they're just doing their thing all the time. But they're taking in so much information. And because developmentally, as a child, we're egocentric, meaning like we are the middle of the universe, everything is happening because of us, or we're causing it. Little things can trigger experiences that don't feel good. And it's not the story of all the things that happened before. What it is what did you decide about yourself because of those things, right? It's not the abuse or the abuser, or just the regular, the teacher that told you to be quiet and didn't allow you to have a voice or whatever. Like, you can call those things trauma, because I think everybody is experiencing some level of trauma, not because it's so horrific sometimes it is horrific, but because we're little and we don't understand. We don't have enough history to understand that that teacher was just trying to teach, and maybe she didn't handle it appropriately, but that doesn't mean that you're not a good person. It just means you were acting up at that particular juncture, and then you decided about yourself that you don't get to have a voice, or that your voice doesn't matter. And so it can be as little as that, these moments. And so that's why the past is not so important, the actual things or the people, but the important part is, what did you decide about yourself? Because that we can heal. And so it starts with the emotional awareness. And sometimes that takes a while for people who don't have experience with that. If you grew up in a family where they never talked about emotions, it's very challenging for you to express emotions because you don't have any examples of that. And so that takes some time. But once you get the emotional awareness, then the process really becomes about going inward, right? So like most people, have situations happen and they take a victim stance. They say, oh, this person said this or did this, or the circumstance was not what I wanted. So they blame that other person for saying or whatever. But in the healing process, that is internal work. You cannot fix out here. You can't fix people and you can't fix circumstances, but you can heal inside here so that whatever is going on out here, you can actually negotiate in a way that feels good or okay to yourself, because that's what's happening. When somebody says something that triggers you or makes you react, it has nothing to do with them. They just are giving you the gift of recognizing that there's some hurt inside here that is responding to that, is being poked at. And when you can recognize that it's not out here, that, you know, your boss didn't make you upset, your employer or client didn't make you upset, you are upset inside, and whatever they're doing is representing that for you. That's a very different way to do healing than saying, oh, you know, my parents were abusive and I'm going to blame them for my crappy life. No, it's, they gave you the opportunity. And I'm not saying it was a pleasant opportunity, but they have given you the opportunity to rectify karma or whatever you're here to heal and grow from. And so if you, after the emotional awareness, then you're going inside and doing healing on you, but you've got to switch from victim stance to personal responsibility.